Hello everybody, welcome to another review. So I'm going to be reviewing the early access to Sleep Token's new album, Even in Arcadia. Not early access as I'm just got early access to it from being a reviewer or anything. I just think every, or whatever has been delivering a lot of these, have given the CD and vinyls out early. So I've got mine 2 days early. I've got the vinyl, which I haven't played yet because I need to hook up my vinyl system still. I've been in probably about 2 years of not doing it because I'm a fucking procrastinator. But I have my CD player set up, my nice Denon, and yeah, this album, I'm going to give you my opinion on how I think it sounded. But let's go through track by track. We got 10 tracks, and I'm going to dive in and give you my honest opinion on each and every single one of them. So let's start off with To Winwood. This one, I think it's titled after a book. I can't remember who wrote the book, but I just know that this is a book title, and I think it draws parallels to that. There's a bit that repeats throughout the start, and it starts off just kind of this, what you'd expect, this kind of slower building up to something intro song, which Atlantic did, The Night Does Not Belong to God, and Chokehold all do. So Sleep Token still keeping that going, but the difference is this is the first song to have a proper breakdown with some screaming, and I think it's got a nice breakdown. Not anything that absolutely shook me, but it's nice to see it nonetheless. But it's kind of one that I saw coming because the song's almost 8 minutes. Sleep Token, if they do longer songs, they tend to have a lot more heavy into them. But To Winwood's great. I feel like it's a good start to the album. As soon as the rapping came on, I knew that Vessel's a lot more confident in spitting bars now, so it's something that Sleep Token have dabbled in a lot more after Take Me Back to Eden, where they experimented a little bit with that. But I think Emergence was kind of a sign of things to come, because that started the trend of a lot of rap in Sleep Token. So if that's not your thing, I can kind of see this already not being a good start. But even in Arcadia's opening track definitely holds up as one of the better opening tracks. It beats Chokehold in my opinion, which is a good song, but this one just generally feels more like I'd see Sleep Token writing, and it leans more into the aspect that the band wants to continue with. One that I personally think works, and I kind of like the way it's structured as well, because it doesn't necessarily feel too much like a Take Me Back to Eden sound, as well as it also blends in more of the earlier stuff, at least to This Place Will Become Your Tomb, which is something I'm probably saying at least these two albums a lot, because trust me, there is a good mix of the last two albums into this new one. But when we go into Emergence, this one is the lead single of the record. This one blew up, it done incredibly well, and I'm happy to see Sleep Token just get this universal praise just in general, just to manage to absolutely hit quite high numbers in the charts, manage to just get so much success, and Emergence is the start of this new era for them. Emergence is good. I feel like this single was always destined just to be kind of one of the average or just below average tracks, because it doesn't necessarily push anything incredibly ambitious other than rapping is a very sole point of it. The way the drums are played into the first rap verse is interesting, as it kind of gives this little wonky sound that makes it sound off beat, but it kind of stays in beat, which I think is one of the charms of Emergence I like. When the guitars go around the second time and you hear Two's drumming, the song definitely picks up there. The go ahead and put your arms around me little line that repeats, I feel like this is one that probably would annoy some people, but I think it kind of adds to the mysterious charm. And we've had some weird vocals and noises even in earlier Sleep Tokens, so this is not anything out of the unordinary for them. This definitely fits that sound. Emergence is good, but compared to To Winwood, this just kind of feels like a little weaker version of it. It's still a good song, and it's still definitely the best choice for a lead single, because I think Emergence kind of just represents a lot of what Sleep Token's changing into rather than what they used to be. But we're going to see how the next track goes. And I think by this point, people who really don't like rap will probably not like this album, because Past Self is the third song in a row that just spits bars, and this song does it the entire time. It has an electronic beat, so there's not really any natural instrumentation rather than just more digitalized elements, which isn't bad. But Past Self, in my opinion, I think is probably the weakest song on the album. It's one that stood out to me, kind of not like a sore thumb, but just, you found a little ketchup stain on your thumb from eating a burger or whatever, and you're like, oh, there it is, and you kind of notice it, you get rid of it, and that's it. I'm not saying Past Self's bad, I still enjoy it. Preferably, to be honest, it does hold up better than some of the songs from Take Me Back to Eden, so there is some nice consistency. I'm really going to mention that. But Past Self, yeah, probably easily the weakest. It is the shortest as well, so this one doesn't stay around for too long, and I think it's still nice to hear anyway. It's the only song to have some swearing in it, but when I listened to it, I couldn't really hear where the swear was because I was more fixated on this beat that was playing out. But yeah, Past Self, probably the weakest song on the album, but it is still a good song, still one that I think has got reasons to pull me back in, so not a skip at all. Dangerous, this one is quite interesting, but probably one of the more forgettable tracks. I like the way this one's structured. It doesn't really have any rap, but it kind of plays into, I guess, a similar way that some of the songs from Take Me Back to Eden do, like The Apparition, minus the rap segment of that. Dangerous kind of brings into this guitars just like that into the chorus, and I think it's nice, but other than that, this one just didn't really hook on to me as well. At least I like it a lot, and I definitely enjoyed what I heard, but by the time it ended, when it got to Caramel, I just kind of forgot what I listened to, and I had to listen to it again. But Dangerous still has some great elements. I think this is a fun song nonetheless, but definitely not the strongest song in their catalogue. Caramel, I think this one was quite controversial for the reggaeton beat that plays throughout the first verse and the first chorus, which a lot of people compare to Ed Sheeran's music, because Ed Sheeran uses a lot of reggaeton beats in newer music, which I wouldn't really say is Ed Sheeran's sound. Like, sure, he does the sound, but it's not really something he branded. I think it's more something that he's pushed more into popularity. But Caramel does the twist up as Two's drumming enters for the second verse, and then the guitars completely hit you into the second chorus. Caramel's biggest highlight, I think many people would know, is that it goes from this kind of nice reggaeton beat with this more hollow feel to the song. A lot of these songs reflect on Vessels as a whole rather than more of this lore the band's building, and I feel like this is the first true song we're highlighted to that fixates lyrically on Vessel's experience of fame, knowing that a lot of people have been trying to reveal his identity. Apparently there's been fans trying to find out where he lives, and he's mentioned this throughout song, and Caramel's impact is great because of that. But that's not the highlight. Despite that being a big theme and that plays into the album, I believe, I think the highlight's the fact that it just goes into a breakdown. It just gives you some Black Gaze-esque screams with blast beats, just double fucking power drum beats on there, with Vessel just screaming for at least 30 seconds. This definitely is something that you can clearly hear because of the production, because the production takes similar aspects to Take Me Back to Eden, something that arguably would be considered overproduced and too clean for the ears, which Sleep Token tries to go for, a squeaky clean sound. Not anything I'm a huge hater for. I do quite like songs to have as clear production as possible, but I can definitely see why people aren't that big on it, especially with how impactful it is to blast Caramel on your speakers like I did. But Caramel's been my favourite of the 3 singles since, and it's definitely still one of my more enjoyed tracks, just because of the lyrics, because of the songwriting, because of the way that the song builds up to this very intense black gaze sort of deathcore-esque moment to the song. It's just catches you by surprise, but I kind of thought it would happen. My first impressions was quite hilarious of this, but yeah, Caramel is definitely an enjoyable song. But we start off, in my opinion, on the stronger side of the album. This is side B, and even In Arcadia is the opening to this. So we had this little chime that was teased with each teaser of each song, and this is the opening to even Arcadia. I like the fact that this song doesn't really play with guitars or drums. It just focuses more on this ambient sound. I thought originally it was going to be a instrumental track only, but I actually really enjoy what it offers. Vessel's vocals are quite powerful here. There's even one point where he gives you a rough, loud delivery, near the final line, but the whole way that this one's orchestrated, it's simple, but it works effectively well. It just has such an impact in this whole environment it's creating. It feels like music you could hear in a video game, something like Dark Souls or something. I just love the aesthetic of this one, and even in Arcadia, as a title track, it's showing that I think they should do more title tracks, because this is generally pretty much almost, at least to me, it's the same tier as Take Me Back to Eden. I love the way Take Me Back to Eden is structured, because I think the whole journey of it is impressive for an 8-minute song. But even in Arcadia, which being half the time of that, just managed to make every second just count. It's one of the shorter songs as well, but I just enjoy the beauty of how well orchestrated everything is here. It's nothing crazy, but the simplicity of sometimes just going for less is more works well, and I think this is a highlight that the second half experiments more into areas that I really enjoy, and I quite like that. Provider's interesting because this one reminds me of the southern western accent of England, because the first line you hear is about him saying provider in a sort of way that just has this Wiltshire accent to it, which is really weird. It's at least a southern accent. He does this with every word that rhymes with either. He just puts that tone on it. Instead of provider, he just goes provider, and he says insider as well. It just sounds so weird. I don't know why it was intentionally chosen, unless that just ended up being the case, but it's very weird indeed. But Provider honestly is still a nice sounding song, even if that sounds weird to me that I guess he's from London, so he's sort of from the south, but it's more of a southwest thing than a London thing, so I'm kind of confused by that. Nonetheless, the song's still quite nice. It's not one of my personal favourites. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Ed Sheeran again at the start, similar to Caramel, but less so because no reggaeton. But Provider's instrumentation's quite nice. I like the part with the guitars properly kick in, you just get the drums, and it just kind of takes you into this classic Sleep Token sound that we hear for a while, but it definitely takes you on this rocky adventure. Provider kind of feels like one of the safer songs, because it does feel like something I could imagine easily from the band, sort of being like Slipknot's Solway Firth, something you'd imagine from the band, but some of the way the vocals are delivered definitely are interesting, to say the least. Yeah, that's pretty much what I had to say about Provider. I was expecting this one to be intense, but yeah, I quite like it. Damacles, this was the third and final single, and this one's generally one of the most well-grounded Sleep Token songs. It doesn't really do rapping like a lot of other songs do, but the journey it takes you in is pretty nice, and I generally think the whole structure of this song is amazing. It definitely feels like early Sleep Token, at least sundowning to This Place Will Become Your Tomb sort of era, because this doesn't really have the writing of the Take Me Back to Eden, which I kind of am happy about them exploring other areas. This one just kind of plays into a little bit more of that Caramel aesthetic of just wondering if fame is really worth it for what it's for what the negatives bring. But I honestly think this one is very well made and generally a good single choice. It's catchy. It has a nice aesthetic to it. I like the cassette tape switch, just flipping that over. Is really nice to hear. Damocles just has this nice aesthetic to it, and I think this was a great choice for a single. Definitely more on the more radio-friendly songs, but easily an amazing song nonetheless. It does radio-friendly a bit better than songs like Granite and Aqua Regia from the last album, so I'm taking that with me. Then you have Gethsemane, I think is pronounced. This is not going to be fun because I don't even know how he pronounces it, and I had to look up how to pronounce this one when I first saw the track list, but Gethsemane is incredible. I'm not even joking. I love the fact that this one just reminded me straight away of This Place Will Become Your Tomb and Euclid. It literally has this aesthetic when it comes to the ambience, the instrumentation, and then you just kind of get this Euclid vocal delivery. The best part about this song is that I didn't even know what to expect. It could be intensely heavy, it could be intensely soft, it could be a mixture, but I like that when the guitars kick in, it just soars through the air. It's not just chuggy breakdown riffs that Sleep Token kind of did a little too much on Take Me Back to Eden. Instead, they're actually letting the guitar soar and play other stuff than just gen, and I like the way that the guitar soars. Matter of fact, I think the best way I could describe this is Polyphia meets Euclid, because there's a moment in the song where near the start where it just sounds like something you'd hear from Polyphia or Unprocessed, and it's generally pretty sick to see that. And I think as the guitars are some of the most experimental and some of the most interesting, Gethsemane makes it work. I like the fact that this song does bring in a breakdown. You do get some background screaming for a little bit, similar to Rain, but it's more audible, but it's still pushed to the back to let the guitars be the kind of highlight of it, and I genuinely like that. It keeps you on your toes, you know what to expect. And yeah, Gethsemane, one of the best non-album singles, and I think you can kind of get the gist why I'm enjoying the second half more on this album. Finally, the most interesting title, and probably the most hyped song on the album, Infinite Baths, for the fact that this song is 8 minutes and 23 seconds, beating Take Me Back to Eden as the longest song, as well as also the title being very interesting, because trust me, if you mention bath, a lot of people are going to think, damn, Vessel's stinky and he needs a shower sort of thing, or a bath rather, don't know why I said that, but it's really interesting how they've managed to work the song around. I think the first half just kind of plays into what you expect, just normal Sleep Token, and I was expecting this to go heavy when it does. I'll talk about that in a sec, but I like the way it kind of slowly brings into this, because it has this chime that generally feels like an album closer track. It kind of feels like they took Euclid and Take Me Back to Eden and mixed the two together as one song, rather than just have, the album closer be Take Me Back to Eden, then the trilogy closer more or less be Euclid to close the chapter on Sleep Token's trilogy arc. But I think Infinite Baths does a much better idea of reminiscing how an album closer should be. Bloodsport's great, and I do like the energy on it. I think the crying towards the end isn't really my cup of tea. It just kind of feels a bit weird. I know it can have emotional impact, but I'm not really a big fan of just kind of like putting it on there, and sometimes I feel it's a bit forced, and I kind of got that impression with Bloodsport. But the album closer, Missing Limbs, is a very beautiful ballad sort of song. Not even sort of, it is literally a ballad. And then Euclid's just kind of a nice reminiscence to take every bit of the journey away, and to start a new chapter and to end it. Infinite Baths is great, because the fact that instead of ending on a high note, it just ends on an intensely fucking heavy one. Literally, the guitars go on for 4 minutes. You pretty much get half the song being entirely metal. Something that a lot of people have complained about, the Sleep Token aren't heavy enough. But the screaming just goes on, and I generally enjoy how intense the guitars are. It generally has this progressive metal ending to it. Something that I can see a lot of prog metal bands doing now, and I love it. Infinite Baths is just a huge surprise, and this and Gethsemane are literally some of the biggest surprises of the album. How long have I been talking for? 17 minutes? Unfortunately it's a Sleep Token review, so they're going to be quite long, but let's just get to the end of this. I've talked about every song, now let's review it. Let's do the overall conclusion of what I think. I generally think it's probably the most consistent work they've put out there. Sundowning is probably a lot of people's favourite, because it kind of takes a more tame approach into what they're trying to experiment with, and they experiment more and more, which is going to be less and less of people's cup of tea. And the band gets a lot of bad rep, especially with the Take Me Back to Eden release, which was quite mixed to positive reviews. But I must say, this probably is the strongest release in terms of consistency, and I think in terms of the aesthetic they're going for. It does have some weaker songs, but then again, I can say that about almost every album from Sleep Token. I wouldn't say they have a masterpiece of a record. They don't have by far the best album a band could have of the year. I don't think they're an album of the year worthy band yet, but I generally enjoy the whole approach that this has taken. This generally has been one of the most interesting albums I've listened to this year, for the fact that even they can surprise me with what they do already is definitely what I liked about it. The first half of songs, we had 2 that we're familiar with and 3 that we're not. But I find that once you dive deeper in, you get more impact with the later stuff than the earlier. The earlier, some of it just feels a bit too familiar and doesn't quite stray into a lot of the experimentation I like with the band that they do with the second half. The second half generally is a lot more consistent, has a lot more higher highs, and I can probably say I'm glad that we don't have a Do You Wish That You Loved Me on this record, or a Fall For Me, because those are kind of deal breakers with what I give an album as a personal conclusion to. But there is not a single song that weakens the quality of this. Maybe Past Self a bit, but it generally has got a lot of moments I think works nicely. It's interesting, despite the fact that they got bigger through heavier stuff, they kept that on kind of less songs. You still get a good bit of screaming here and there, but a lot of songs shine more in other areas with rapping rather than just let's do the same thing again. People might disagree. You might call this an extension to Take Me Back to Eden's catalogue, and I can get that, but I feel like there's more to it than just that, especially since I get a lot of This Place Will Become Your Tomb, which I think is probably the band's strongest album, potentially still, but this isn't far from it. I consider this a very close to that album favourite, and I must say, it's not a 5 out of 5 for me. I don't think Death Heaven's going to get beaten by Sleep Token, but this is pretty close. This is a 4.5 out of 5 for me. I can say that confidently. I enjoyed the ride. I didn't really feel bored listening to this album, and I generally think it is stronger than Take Me Back to Eden. Because that was one of my first reviews, I think I gave it a bit too high of a score. I might change it a little bit because there's some songs that don't really click as much as they did, or they just don't really work necessarily as well, and I might have overhyped it. But going through this perspective, go from a perspective of a reviewer as well as just someone who likes the band in general, I think this is definitely a great work, and I think RCA Records has managed to push a good opportunity on Sleep Token, because there's some great ideas here. Generally a fantastic album, and I'm not saying that as a bullshit. I generally enjoy it, and I think it is an amazing album. The Sleep Token hate I just disagree with. I know a lot of people don't enjoy it, and I get that. It's like with Ghost hate, I just feel a lot of it is just contrived because a lot of people hit other people's shit on it, and it just pisses me off when you get influencers that just crap on it and a lot of people just kind of blindly agree. I don't think Sleep Token's music is that terrible, to be honest. I'm not going to say they're the most perfect band. They're certainly not the best band of all time, and I don't think they're going to come close to that, but it's certainly one of my more personal guilty pleasure bands that I think they still manage to make music millions of people like and make it work. But yeah, that's it. This album's great, and that's all I have to say. So thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.